Okay, so what if I told you that a single material, mentioned just once in an ancient text, wasn't just a piece of wood? What if it was actually a piece of lost technology, the very thing that saved our entire species? Well, one theory says that's not a myth. It's the key to understanding a lost world, and the real reason we're all here today.
We all know the story, right? A gigantic ark, built to ride out a world-ending flood, carrying the last survivors of life on Earth. It's a tale that's foundational for so many people. But according to this theory, the real mystery isn't the flood. It's what the ark was made of.
The text is surprisingly specific about this. The ark wasn't built from pine or oak or anything we'd recognize. It was made from gopher wood. And that's a term that shows up exactly once in the entire historical record. Just once. So what on earth was it? And why was it so important? And this is where the unified theory of geologic history comes in. This theory argues that gopher wood isn't just some ancient, forgotten word. It's the linchpin in a completely radical rethinking of our planet's past, and maybe even our own origins. To get our heads around this wood, we first have to picture the world it came from. And, according to this theory, it was a very, very different place than the Earth we know. So the core idea here is that the pre-flood Earth had zero axial tilt. Just imagine that for a second. No tilt means no seasons, no freezing winters, no blazing summers, just one stable global climate all year round. And that would have had a huge impact on everything, especially how trees grew. And that leads us right to the material itself, because a world without seasons doesn't just grow different trees, it grows a completely different kind of wood. So here's the big idea. Gopher wood, the theory says, is ring-free timber. You see, trees in our world have rings because their growth starts and stops with the changing seasons. But in a world with a constant, perfect climate, trees would just grow continuously, creating a perfectly uniform structure from the inside out. Now, that uniform structure, that's what makes all the difference. In the wood we have today, those annual rings are actually structural weak points. You've got the boundary between the dense, late-season wood and the more porous, early-season wood, and that's exactly where timber cracks and splits under pressure. But ring-free wood, it would have none of that. It would be a kind of superwood with incredible uniform strength. And if you're building a vessel to survive a planet-wide cataclysm, that's not just a nice-to-have, it's an absolute necessity. The theory basically says that only a material with the kind of integrity of gopher wood could have possibly held together against the unbelievable forces of a global flood. But the vessel itself, made from this amazing gopher wood, was just the container. The really important story is about what and who it was built to protect. Just 8 human survivors. That's it. The entire future of our species was riding on the structural integrity of that one ship. So the Ark's mission was about more than just, staying alive. It was a lifeboat for information. It was designed to preserve 2 absolutely crucial things: humanity's genetic blueprint and the intellectual blueprint for an entire civilization. Let's talk about that genetic blueprint. The theory calls it a front-loaded genome. Think of it kind of like a perfect, original master file of our DNA. Way richer and more pristine than ours, not damaged by generations of mutations. It carried the latent potential for all the human diversity we see today. So how could it be so perfect? Well, the theory proposes that the pre-flood world had a different kind of atmosphere, one that gave much better protection from UV radiation. This would have dramatically slowed down the rate of genetic mutation, keeping that master file, that genome, clean and stable for generations. But it wasn't just about genes. There was that other blueprint, the civilizational one. The survivors weren't cavemen starting from scratch. No way. They carried the memory of advanced agriculture, architecture, math, astronomy, all the essential knowledge from the world that was lost. And this idea of inherited knowledge, well, that's the theory's explanation for one of the biggest mysteries in archaeology.
You see, one of the biggest questions out there is why do advanced civilizations like ancient Sumer and Egypt seem to just pop up in the archaeological record fully formed? This theory has a simple answer. They weren't inventing civilization from zero. They were rebuilding it from memory.
So the timeline looks like this. You have a massive cataclysmic event. Then you have the 8 survivors landing with all this preserved knowledge. And then almost immediately after, you see these incredibly advanced societies emerging.
not after thousands of years of slow progress, but boom, right away, because the blueprint was already there. So the whole plan for survival really rested on these three pillars, all working together. First, you needed the vessel, the super strong gopher wood ark to survive the event itself. Second, you needed the genome, the front-loaded genetic code to ensure humanity's biological future. And third, you needed the knowledge, the intellectual know-how to rebuild the world. And when you look at it that way, gopherwood stops being just a strange word in an old book. It becomes what it truly was, according to this theory, an essential piece of technology, a kind of advanced material science from a lost world that made everything else, our entire existence, possible. It's a pretty radical idea, right? It totally reframes our origin story, and it leaves us with one heck of a question to chew on. If our earliest, greatest civilizations weren't invented from scratch, but were rebuilt from memory, what other parts of our ancient history do we need to look at in a completely new light?